try to keep it light as possible. So the title that appears in the program is one word, is parking. And I was late in giving in the title, but anyway, this is parking. I'm not sure this is actually parking, but, and this is joint work with some colleagues, as you can see there. Okay, so there's a number of people that study parking as a real subject. I mean, well, they really care about parking. These are the people that do traffic. One of the better knowns is Donald Soup, who's a professor at UCSD. He has this 800-page book, The High Cost of Free Parking. I have not read it. And he makes all sorts of claims there, like interesting claims, like 20% of the cars in Los Angeles intersections, they'll actually go to the people stopped at the red light, and they ask them, "What are you doing here?" And it turned out 20% of them are just circling the block. It's actually more than 20. I mean, and he has a following. You've heard of Sandinistas, the Soupistas. This is a following of Donald Soup, which has close to 1,000 members. I looked at a Facebook page, a Soupista Facebook page. It's all about how all the evils in the world can be traced back to free parking. And they actually have convincing explanations as to why this is so. So urban sprawl is created because people build parking lots, but once you build parking lots, stores have to be far away from one another, so people need cars. So you can see that there's clearly an equilibrium issue here, and therefore the ills of the modern world are due to free parking. This is, by the way, is a very economic way of thinking about it. Right? There's several other references, and there's a whole list of papers. If you look at Amazon, you'll see that there's a whole list of papers that why parking is such a big issue. And then there's this Freakonomics radio podcast, which I recommend to everybody, which is very amusing. I mean, you don't have to take it seriously, but it's very amusing, and they have all sorts of issues, including they have a podcast called Parking is Hell. So that's, and there's a lot, it seems like there's a lot of real research on parking. I mean, real research, not the type of thing I'll be talking about. But now, Donald Soup is also involved in this SF Park system, which some of you might have known of. This is a pilot system in San Francisco. And if you go to sfpark.org, you have all sorts of explanations of what this thing is about. I'll just quote one line from there. It says, SF Park charges the lowest possible hourly rate to achieve the right level of parking availability. This is a statement from the website. What that means, I'm not quite sure, but it's in the website. So let me consider the following setting. We have cars, particular cars, online arrivals, no departures. Nobody's departing. Everybody parks, and that's it. Stays there for the rest of their life. I think there was this joke about if you find a parking spot in Tel Aviv, you buy a car. So to put anyway, so there's an undirected graph. Edges have lengths. Vertices are a vertex is a parking spot, but it's also a destination. So somebody wants to get to a certain vertex. You can also park there. There could be lots more parking spots than destinations. There's a price tag on parking spaces, and different parking spots may have different prices. This is the way the SF Park sets up the pricing in a region, depending on how congested that region is. Cars arrive online, and the problem I'll be considering now is that each car seeks to minimize the sum of the walking distance and the charge for parking. So it's a quasi-linear setting. You get charged for parking, and you have to walk to your destination, because this is not necessarily the right thing to optimize. You might want to maximize your walking distance, but in this model, we're trying to minimize walking distance and the charge for parking. Now, the tricky thing here is that the prices are set before the destination is known. So a car comes in, the prices are there, they're posted. They can change periodically, but I mean, you don't know where the car is heading and then set a price for that thing. So let me mention some results. So there's online arrivals, there's an unweighted edges, no weight, unweighted, so all edges of length 1, free parking, no charges. So cars come in, the social welfare is essentially as bad as it could possibly be. It's essentially order of the number of vertices in the graph, worse than what it would be optimally. There's a tilde here, so there's some log factors here that are not quite tight, but it's essentially as bad as it could possibly be. This is for trees. For the line, which is just, think of a strip mall or main street in some town, then the social welfare is about square root of the number of vertices. This is both a lower bound and an upper bound. So these things are tight to within some log factors. And the technical difficulty here is proving the upper bound. The lower bound, it'll be easy, I'll show it. The upper bound is sort of not so trivial. These are some ideas. Now, we submitted this to EC. It was rejected, standard thing. But anyway, the EC reviewers said that the price of anarchy term is inapplicable. So notice I'm not using the word price of anarchy here. Although you still recognize it as somehow being related to that notion. I'm going to go back in a moment. Okay, so this is my peeve, and I'll forget it for now. So it's not electronic commerce. It's not CS. It's not econ. It's not.
It's just a normal competitive ratio from back then when you did
it's no. Okay, good question. Very good question. I'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so for unweighted graphs, we see that the n is the number of vertices, and there's some gaps, some logarithmic gaps here. Now, what if we add pricing? And we do that. We start pricing these things dynamically, depending on who's parked right now, not on where people are planning to park, because we don't know that. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to. Okay, so if we actually the pricing thing is not relevant. So online arrivals weighted edges. Then for line graphs, before we had for unweighted edges, for line graphs we get an exponential gap with respect to optimum. I mean, arbitrarily bad, in a sense. And with dynamic pricing, we can get logarithmic worse than optimal. So this is a double exponential improvement. So by setting the right prices, we get a double exponential improvement in the social welfare. This is only single exponential if it's unweighted, because if it's unweighted, we don't have this exponential gap. We have only a polynomial gap. So the setting the right dynamic prices greatly improves this notion of social welfare. Okay. So the same problem has been around for a long time, the arrivals only problem, with a twist, and almost the same problem. It's called the online min-cost metric matching problem. And it's almost the same thing, I mean, and it's been studied for quite a while. Now, the price of anarchy of free parking, the online metrical matching problem doesn't talk about payments at all. There's no notion of payment. Everything is free. And translating it into parking terms, it means free parking. The price of anarchy of free parking for a given input is the comparative ratio of the greedy algorithm. So it's not the comparative ratio. The comparative ratio is what you can get for the best algorithm. This is the comparative ratio of the greedy algorithm for online metrical matching. So this is the greedy algorithm. But let's talk about the difference between online algorithms and dynamic pricing. So in the online setting, we get a request. A car comes in and tells us, I want to park next to the drugstore. You say, well, you don't park next to the drugstore, you park over there. Right? So this is an online algorithm will actually give orders to cars. Right? Say, you go there, you go there. Potentially, it could also do the same thing with pricing. It could say everything else except next to the post office costs infinity. Right? This would have the same effect in terms of a selfish agent. But in dynamic pricing, we want to do something else. We want to set pricing that will work for any incoming car. It doesn't matter where the car wants to park. So we don't. So there's a distinction between an online algorithm and a pricing scheme. Dynamic pricing scheme. The dynamic says, you see, has to come in no matter where the car wants to park. And an online algorithm knows where the car is going to park and tells it basically.
You change it after every car.
You change it. It changes. It's going to be changing over time. It'll be changing over time. It could change dramatically. It could also change.
And in principle, you can change after every single car is hired.
In principle, it can change after a single car, which raises all sorts of interesting questions, like why not start circling the block until the price changes? And you could ask all sorts of interesting questions, and we can try to deal with these questions too. But so anyway, the online min-cost metric matching has a very long history, and it goes back to '91, and there's interesting polylogarithmic algorithms in some cases, which are based on HSTs. The HST person is not here, but anyway, the HSTs, and then specifically Louis and Gupta, they give a log k, thing of log k, k as being n, a competitive algorithm for doubling metrics, and then a very simple log k competitive algorithm for line metrics. I just mentioned your name, in fact, without mentioning your name. HSTs came into play, so. Now, there's been prior work on incentive-based parking. In addition to all these numerous papers that I cited in the beginning, which are also related in some way to incentive-based parking, but don't do this type of analysis. And specifically, I'll mention Meir Chen and Michal, which has a different setting. But the point is that there you're trying to have as many people park as possible. And people have a value for parking, and they won't, and they have a value for a service, and they won't park if it's too far away. So it's a different type of scenario. And this is a maximal bipartite matching issue. Now, let me just give you the lower bound, the exponential lower bound for the case of a line where there's weights on the edges. So consider the following input. In fact, car number 1 wanted to park here and parked here. Car number 2 came here. It could park either here or here, but this is 1 minus epsilon, so it prefers to park to the left.
Also, it would have to do a U-turn.
Yeah. Car 3 now, these things are built up in such a way that car 3 actually now prefers to go here. And you can easily see what's going to happen here. And thanks to Alon for these wonderful animations. And the cost here is exponential. Whereas optimally, what you should do is that this car should actually give up a little bit, just park here rather than go here. And from now on, everybody just parks exactly at their destination, right? And the cost is much less. So you can see there's an exponential gap in the weighted line. Now, I'll give you the lower bound for the unweighted line as well. I'm going to have to skip as usual. So anyway, there's an initial block of cars, each of which wants to park exactly at this spot just below it. These are the distances between the vertices are 1. And then a car comes in here, and they can either park here, but it's slightly to the left of the center here, or it can park here on the other side. So it obviously prefers to go here. And this happens for all of these cars. So what we have is that the overall cost here is something like nk plus 1 minus 2k squared. It's nk that matters. Whereas the optimal thing would be to have this initial block of cars just move aside, park here, and all of these could just park right next to their destination. And therefore, we see that there's a lower bound of root n. We just plug in k equals root n. And the interesting thing is that this is also an upper bound for greedy. I mean, I don't know how interesting that is, but this is tight.
You assume that if you park in the same place, you still pay 1.
Yeah, I'm assuming you pay 1. You could change that. We've actually discussed this. So if you just the act of parking will cost you 1, and otherwise you. So we can put. I'm not going to talk about this at all. Actually, I'm skipping this. Let me just mention something. You can, if you prove something on the infinite line, you can also. It also holds for the finite line. And this is I'm trying to. It's a very simple thing. Whatever scenario you have here on this line. And this finite line, you can essentially assimilate the same thing in an infinite line by setting up these football team on this side, football team on this side, and now you have to park in the middle. So this is a translation. Okay. Okay, let me give you a lower bound. Again, these are unweighted graphs. Actually, I'm going to try to get to the pricing. This is a lower bound. So, in this 2012 paper, Louis and Gupta devised a non-line algorithm. This is a non-line algorithm in the classical comparative ratio sense, whereby for metrical matching, whereby if somebody they talk in different terminology, they have terminology of servers, and the terminology doesn't matter. I'm translating the terminology. If a car comes in here, it parks here probabilistically with probability dr over dl plus dr. dr is the length of the contiguous section of parked cars. So dr is how much it wants to get to this shop over here. There are 100 cars parked to its right. There's 10 cars parked to its left, and it's going to go here with probability 100 over 110. So that's sort of the right, what seems to be the right thing. It's behaving intelligently. It's preferring to go to the closer endpoint, to the place that's closer, but it might also go to the other side. We know this is in an oblivious setting. This is sort of confusing the worst case, confusing the adversary, and surprisingly, this thing becomes logarithmic. So this is logarithmic, and they have other algorithms which we haven't yet been able to convert for other metrics. We get an order log n price of anarchy by simulating Louis Gupta, but we do this by pricing. So this is a non-line algorithm. This is pricing. So we have to convert whatever happens in an non-line algorithm to a pricing scheme. So these cars, there's parked cars here. There's no departures, so only arrivals. So there's nothing. It doesn't make any sense to put prices down here. I'm going to pretend I'm going to put prices down here anyway, just for the picture. Otherwise, the picture will look strange. So the parking scheme looks like this. We choose a random point. between U, which is the vertex just, or parking spot just to the left, and V, which is a parking spot just to the right. And we set prices that look like this. Now this slope is 1. You could argue that maybe you want to have a slightly different slope. I'll explain why, because now we're going to have indifference. But anyway. And now this is chosen at random, and we put these prices. So what does this mean? It means that this one this is the charge for parking here. Right? This is a one-time charge because I'm assuming people leave their cars there to die. They never come back, right? So it's a one-time fee for parking your car there, and that's it. And there's no departures or anything in this model. Okay. Now, I want to say that if you actually want to reach this shop, this is your target shop, you should now be indifferent between going to U and going to V. Why would you be indifferent? Well, what is your charge for going to V? It's the distance, right? Plus the cost, right? Well, so it's this plus this, but this is 90 degrees, so this is the same as this. So basically, parking here is going to cost you in terms of parking cost plus distance. It's going to cost you this height. Parking here is going to cost you this height, and they're going to be indifferent between the two of them. In fact, they're also going to be indifferent if you were to choose this one, right? This one, or any of these, you'd be indifferent between them. Now, what's the probability? An agent that wants to reach a certain spot, or an agent wants to reach this spot. What's the probability that it's going to? So if we were running an online algorithm, we would toss a coin and tell it. We toss a coin. We say the probability dr over dl plus dr, you'll go here. Probability dl over dl plus dr, you'll go here. This is an online algorithm, but we can't do that. But we've chosen S at random. So this has the exact same effect because the randomization is over the choice of S. It's over the choice of pricing schemes. So the probability that an agent goes F is the probability that S is to the right of the goal, which is exactly dr over d. D is the sum of dr plus dl, which is exactly the same as in the Louis-Gupta scheme. So this payment scheme has the property that it's simulating an online algorithm by pricing. Now there can be many blocks because you have many contiguous things. So the picture looks more complicated. And it's easy to see that you actually have to it has to look like this. It doesn't, okay, why do we keep on going, in fact? A question that might be asked is, why do we keep on going over here? Why do we care about these things? Because we want to make sure that if somebody actually wants to go to a certain shop and the parking spot in front of that shop is empty, then he will park there, she will park there. So if we didn't have this part, we wouldn't have that property because we'd have a high cost, say we'd have a high cost here and no cost here. Then somebody who wants to park here, who actually wants to get to this destination, would actually move over. But we don't want that to happen. We want to have the property that if you do go to a shop, which is your destination, you get to park there. I'm going to cut it short. Okay, so if there's many blocks, you basically have to sum them up, and you get this type of terrain. This is a payment terrain. This payment terrain has the property that it's a complete simulation of Louis-Gupta. Okay, so it's a simulation of Louis-Gupta via payments. So summarize, this is a double exponential improvement in the price of anarchy, and should we talk to Donald Soup or become allies? So I don't know, and that was a joke. Anybody familiar? Anybody know him? No. In this audience, nobody knows. Nobody follows him religiously? No. Okay. We should know that free parking is the source of all evil. I mean, so there's a lot of models. I mean, if you look at these, these books, which I haven't looked at, you'll probably find lots and lots and lots and lots of problems, which you can try to look at. So you want to deal with arrivals and departures. It's easy to see actually that if you add arrivals and departures to the setting we were talking about before, and you have arbitrary service times, you get very bad results. I mean, very bad. But let's talk about a reasonable goal, which is when will this parking space finally be free, right? I mean, this is a good question, right? If I keep on circling around, I want to know that, right? The possible answer is that it's the time it takes to walk from that parking spot to wherever you want to go, to the greengrocers, buy the vegetables, and walk back, right? So this is a measure of how long this parking spot will be occupied. Now it has structure, right? It has more structure than just an arbitrary setting. So the further away you park, the longer you will occupy the parking spot. And of course, this means that you have to be more clever, which means that if you're selfish, you'll be more stupid, which means that there's more room for incompetence, selfishness, and inefficiency. And I'm just going to mention that there's lots of other directions that one can talk about. And I think I want to say thank you, and that will be it. So thank you very much. And I'll be happy to take questions.
Are the prices increasing over time?
Oh, so no, not necessarily. In fact, okay, if people are only arriving, then yes, they will be increasing over time. But every time, the way I think about it is that every time you have these contiguous blocks of parked cars, using them you compute the pricing landscape. And every time it changes. And if you've actually made a change in something that's not relevant, that there's no collusion between these two landscapes, then it won't influence faraway parts of the graph. So the impact could be local, but it could also be a global impact on this pricing. I mean, there are suggestions. It might be. This is all conjecture, that similar ideas will work in general for much more general structures of graphs. You'll have more of a lunar landscape. We've been talking about these type of ideas, but haven't seen anything yet. So, I mean, it would be nice to take say this online algorithm for doubling metrics and do something with that. We were playing a little bit with HSTs. We couldn't get much progress in it. But yeah, I mean, there could be ways of coming up with pricing that emulate online algorithms. This is a more general question than just here. I mean, I think it's interesting direction. Thank you.